It is sort of weird talking to a bunch of blank screens, so it's exciting to talk to everybody. And I think Bardo linked my bio. I don't know if she screen shared or if she just linked it in Discord, which is fine. So if you guys have questions on who I am, that's who I am. But the big thing is I'm Mila's partner in Orchard Farm and part of the 3050 gang that helped make Stoner Cats. So I want to get to the point where there's like lots of questions and stuff, but I figured I would at least give a basic presentation on just basic pitches. And I have no idea how experienced all of you are, if there are writers in the group, if there are creators in the group, artists in the group, directors, whatever, or if you're all people who are coming kind of without that background. But either way, I figured I'd give you just enough of a presentation to give some basics. And then when we get into questions, you guys can jump in and ask questions. All righty. I wish I could see everybody's face. But I'm going to do a little screen share of the thing that I put together that Sarah helped me this morning with tech because she's a genius. Okay, everybody can see that? Yep. I'm hoping yes, because I can't see the chat now. Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right, guys. So let's start with. I'm going to start with a little bit of the kind of basics on before you even get to making the pitch. You need to read a million scripts. You need to find pitch docs. I'll point you to a couple places today where you can find those. You need to do some writing, rewriting, and you need to know what you want to pitch. The key of every single show, drama, comedy, short, animated, whatever, is conflict. So you need to make sure that whatever it is that you're pitching has a lot of ongoing conflict that you guys get to play with, that the creators and the community gets to play with. It's a really big deal. So for pitching, you want to, beforehand, you need to write or outline your pitch. It can be bullet points or it can be fully written out, but you need to know what you're pitching. Otherwise you end up rambling. And this is the best way to do it. Some people, we have there are big professional fancy writers who sit down and actually read their pitch out. It's not so common, but it happens. We just sold a Netflix movie where the writer read their pitch to Netflix. And if you're somebody who nerves kick in, reading is the way to go. But if you're somebody who feels like they're sort of extemporaneously better, then think about an outline and bullet points and make sure that you're hitting those bullet points and not going beyond that. One of the really big things is show your passion, show that you are professional, be somebody that we want to work with. And then caveat, I'm going to swear a lot. I just do. Sorry. So don't be an asshole. We have a very big no asshole policy when it comes to our creative team. And as you guys have had some experience with Ash, Sarah, and Chris, I mean, they're literally the nicest people in the world. And that's what we like from kind of all of our teams, except for Ash sometimes. Trauma. Wow. Just kidding. I know. That's what I needed. No drama. They're actually the most wonderful people, and that's what you need to be, and that's what you need to bring across to people. You need to understand that a lot of people have ideas for shows, and we get pitches. I mean, when we are open for pitches, which isn't always, sometimes we're too busy to take on new projects, but when we are open for pitches, we'll hear 3 or 4 a day, and only some of them even remotely stick. And people will come up with an idea that they think is completely unique and never heard from before, and we've heard it 50 times. So sometimes you think, hey, that show isn't on TV, or hey, that movie doesn't exist. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist in development, because there is an extraordinary amount of development that people like me and studios and networks have seen. And unfortunately, because of that, sometimes it feels not fresh to us, but to an audience it might. So that's kind of what actually part of what we're so excited here is to hear from the community, what feels fresh to you guys and what do you want to see. That's a very exciting thing to us. So, and then also to really understand that storytelling is collaborative. It is. Notes are a thing, collaboration is a thing, and it always makes it better. Even the worst notes can make it better if you are really focused on improving. So we're going to talk about pitch structure. And before you can pitch a show, you have to know what the show is. And a lot of what determines the structure of the pitch is whether or not the show is episodic in nature, serialized in nature, or a hybrid of those two. So you guys, I'm sure everybody understands this, but just briefly, an episodic show, like a broadcast comedy, is an episodic show. There's a reset after most episodes. If there are any character arcs, they're very light. You know, Friends is a perfect example. It's the one where. That's episodic. It's the one where. Or a procedural show. You know, those cop and drama, you know, the Law and Order is a procedural show. So every single episode has its own closed-ended story. And then there's shows like Grey's Anatomy, which are a hybrid. So it's partially serialized and partially procedural. So that's the kind of thing. And then, of course, there's the big serialized shows, like the big Game of Thrones is obviously entirely serialized. Lots of the kind of dramedies, or, you know, Fleabag is totally serialized. So they feel more like a long movie, but each one of those episodes still need to feel satisfying. So you want to figure out what your structure is. And if it's shorts, and that's easy, you know, but even within shorts, you have those opportunities too of being episodic or serialized. So when you go to pitch, the very first thing in every single pitch is why you? Why are you the only person that can write this thing? Do you have a special experience in your family that brought this idea to you? Do you have a specific passion for something? Particularly when it comes to an emerging talent, you need to have a unique point of view on some material. And so your uniqueness, your little niche thing, is the thing that we're actually looking for. If you're talking about, like, you know, I want to adapt this major book, we'll go to a bigger person, because that's kind of how it usually works. But like, you have a specific story that you want to tell, that's the thing that's going to be passionate, like that we're going to get passionate about. You know, Sarah and Ash and Chris came into us, this was before COVID. It was the end of 2019, and they talked about working together, working in the bigger studio situation on kids animation, and how the way that they got through it was by creating this crazy idea of Mrs. Stoner and her cats. So that it's that kind of thing that you want to hear, is like, how did we get here, and what are you passionate about, and why? And then really, really important is themes. So what is the show really about? What is your project really about? Like, you know, there's like plot and character and all that other fun stuff, but underneath it, what is the reason that we watch, and what's the thing that gets us in our heart? And trust me, we're getting there with Stoner Cats, and I won't spoil that for you, but like, there is a lot of heart in it too. There's always big underlying themes in shows that we love, whether it's, you know, father and daughter issues, or you know, power race issues, whatever it is, there's always something to be said that's beyond what's on the surface. So you want to look at that, and you typically talk about it up front in the pitch, but sometimes you can fill it in other places. So the next part, so, you know, you talk about yourself, why you're the person. You talk about the kinds of things you want to talk that you think this show is really about, the underneath of the show is really about. And then it's just a log line. Like, you start with like, okay, here's what the big idea is. I mean, this is literally the Stoner Cats log line that the guys did. And then after that is, I've included a log line that was from a show that we've sold like 5 times. We just keep selling the show. Because Hollywood's crazy. But it's just a little bit of enough about what the show really is for the listener to be able to hang the rest of the information on. And then usually you'll talk about, like, you know, it's a 5-minute episodic animated show, or it is an hour serialized drama. Think of the tone of Ozark, whatever the thing is. You can give it some comps, you can give us some ideas, some basic shorthand information to understand, and for us to hang on as we go into the next sections of like the nitty gritty of the show. Everybody follow me? Can we just get a, like, everybody cool, followed, good? Okay, yes, Sarah says yes, so I'll take it. Great. Okay, so let's go into the meat of the pitch. So this is, I think the next thing you want to talk about is depending on the show that you're doing. If you're doing let's talk about a 30-minute broadcast comedy. The very next thing you're going to talk about is character. because that's what broadcast comedies live and die on, is characters. So you're going to want to talk about, I'm just going to use Friends because everybody sort of knows Friends. It's Rachel. She's just left her fiance at the altar. She comes back in and meets this group of friends and whatever. But we talk about the kind of person that Rachel is. We talk about the kind of person Monica is. She's uptight, she's a chef, she's whatever those things are. But you kind of dig into those characters next. And that's on the broadcast sides would be your real, or really the comedy side would be your next big sections, and where you would spend the most of your time talking about on a comedy. Wait, I have, we'll get, Curtis, I'll come back to you on questions too, for sure. So on the comedy side, character, and then the really important part of comedy is the characters between the characters. So where, like, let's use Community as an example. There's Troy and there's Abed. There's nothing better than Troy and Abed together. So those kinds of character dynamics are the things that you want to talk about in your character section, particularly for the 30-minute relationship sort of side. So that's on the comedy side. You would focus, the meat of your thing would be on characters. On this sort of dramedy serialized side, you would also really get into characters, but spend a lot more time talking about arcs and relationships and conflicts. So you would start in those character sections, and we'll get into some examples here. You'll start establishing some of the conflicts that you're going to be playing out in series. So, you can talk about how we meet Meredith. I'm going to use Grey's Anatomy, sorry. I'm just going to try to use things that people might know the most. We meet Meredith in the pilot, and she has just slept with this guy that she doesn't know who he is. She shows up the first day. She's plucky and excited and ready to be this amazing doctor, and realizes that the guy that she slept with the night before is essentially her boss. So those kinds of things can be put into these character sections where we talk about Meredith a little bit, and then talk about this guy she slept with, and then we go right into who happens to be Derek, and then we talk about Derek. So that's the way you can sort of elegantly switch between those characters in really smooth kinds of ways. When you're talking about a bigger serialized piece, very often you need to spend some time before you can get into characters. You need to spend some time talking about the world of the show. The world of Friends is a coffee shop and an apartment, but the world of Game of Thrones, you need to spend some time talking about a big fantasy world if you're establishing that. Or if it's a niche world like Glow, you need to spend some time establishing that world before you get into characters. So think about kind of how those pieces shift together. So I'm going to give you some big pieces, and in this middle here, there might be some kind of shifting and back and forth, but sometimes world is sort of irrelevant. But if it is, put it in there right away. And then sometimes let's talk about, I'll go back in just a second. And then sometimes there's a way, this is much harder and you need a lot more finesse, where you intro the character in the pilot. So as you're talking about the pilot, which we'll get to in a minute, you can like literally say, we open on, talk about what the opening scene is, we meet, and you talk about the character that we meet at that point. And then as you're meeting each character, the way that you would in a pilot is you introduce one character after another and meet them. You would intro that character and talk about who they are, a little bit of what their history is, and a little bit of, what their relationships with other people are, and then move on to the next piece of the plot. That is much harder and takes much more finesse. So if you guys are on the more emerging side where you're just starting to do this, put a character section for yourself, make it easier, because then when you start talking about these characters in terms of how they fit in the plot, it'll be there for you. But I'll show you some examples of both. So here's a character here. Stone Cat's character section. So we'll get into a little bit more of this, but this is great. This kind of thing of like strengths and weaknesses is a really big, a big help, a big shorthand in terms of a pitch. There are a couple other shorthands, like you can say, Rachel, think Jennifer Aniston. You can say Fifi, think Mila Kunis. Those are some easy shorthands of getting a listener to be able to understand the archetype of what that character is. And you kind of want to think in archetypes when it comes to pitches, just because it's just a little bit easier in terms of shorthand. Here is an example of one. This is a show that we did at ABC with Javier Grillo Marks Watch. Right down that website, he puts all of his pitch pages all of his scripts, all of it online. So you can download and look and read all of that stuff. But you see that in here, he talks about, this is Shika. She's this guy's daughter. She taught this person to fight, so we know that she's a badass. So we learn here that Shika's a badass. That's incredibly helpful information. And then we also learn where we're going to go in some of the plot. And we learn that she's going to have this incredible romantic relationship that we're going to have fun with. This show was like an action comedy dramedy for ABC that didn't go. Happens. But you know, you can tell in the way that he has written these character descriptions, you get a little bit of sense of the tone of the show. So you, as you're writing your pitch, you can infiltrate the pitch with the tone, with the ideas and the tones of the show. And then you can talk about, you know, then this is the next guy, and it gives us a little bit of like the kind of guy this is and the kinds of areas we're going to see him play in the show. Here is and this is a really traditional comedy kind of thing. And one of the things I really like about the way, this is Colton and Abood. They're the creators of Home Economics. Watch it, it's great. These guys are awesome. They're some of the best pitchers in the world. We pitched like 5 shows with them. But the elegance of what they have is, we talk about Wilson, the kind of guy he is. He's going to, and then like who his wife is. And there's some little bits and pieces in here that kind of get you a sense of some of the story that we're going to play in. So that's really important. So in your character section, it's like, here's who this guy is, here is their history to the people around them. And here are the kinds of conflicts or stories that they're going to play around in. So that's a really easy, great way of kind of doing a character section. So now, then after character section, you get into the pilot. And in an episodic show, the pilot section can be as like short as, when we meet our characters, Rachel has left her fiance at the altar and she moves in with Monica, causing Ross to freak out because obviously he's always been in love with Rachel. It can be as short as that when you're talking about an episodic comedy kind of thing. In a procedural, you'll want to talk about the world that you're establishing in that. Like, you know, we're talking about the cops, we're going to meet the characters that we're going to meet. But just so you know, the story areas for like broadcast comedies, for most comedies that are episodic, story areas for any episodic show will change when you're in development. So you can say, oh, I'm going to start my broadcast police drama with this case. You'll end up swapping out a million other cases to find the right, exact, perfect one that fits. So you can talk a little bit about like what that case is, what that story is, but what's really important is that we're meeting the characters and the people that we're going to spend time and energy and effort with. So that's really fun. And then, of course, in serialized shows, if it's about character, what you're establishing are those characters' soap dynamics. And when we say soap in our world, we don't mean like Days of Our Lives. We mean where the engine of the show is character relationships. And they're hard. And I think they're actually the hardest things to make right now. And if you look back at like kind of the best soaps that ever existed, if we did them now, they would feel very low concept. You know, if you look back at whatever the OC or Gilmore Girls, they feel a little low concept now. So it's almost a little bit dated. So if you're going to do something that's really just on the relationships of the show, between the characters, you need to be digging in so deeply to those characters and then establishing so many threads and places for us to go kind of in the ongoing stories. And then, of course, so that in that pilot, you really need to talk about, you know, we start off at grandma's funeral. This is what's happened, and this is the change in these people's lives that is going to send them on their way onto a journey that we want to watch. Every pilot, watch them all. There's a change in these people's lives. It's the removing of the norm for them. It's the inciting incident that's going to create drama or comedy that we're going to want to continue to follow. So you want to make sure that that you are creating something that we don't just drop into these guys hanging out together. That's not going to be interesting. Or drop into these cops have already been solving a bunch of crimes. There has to be a new element to it that helps shake up that world so that there is more conflict to play with. And then, of course, obviously, they're the shows that we all love. They're the big, huge world building. I mean, like, I'm a huge sci-fi nerd, so we can talk about that. But those big world building things, and those you have a lot of work to do in terms of plot. You have to make sure that every plot beat you talk about in your pilot ties to a character moment. So it's not plots for plot's sake. Plot is only there for character's sake. So that's super duper important. And in a big serialized show, you're going to spend a lot of time talking about plot because in that pilot you are establishing so many storylines that we're going to play out with. So that's where you're going to spend a lot of your time. And then you need to talk about, in shows like that, what the kind of format of each episode is going to look like, because they can be unwieldy. Those are I think the hardest to really pitch. And we'll talk about ways to make it easier a little bit later. And then really important is the midpoint of your pilot, whatever it is, you get away from your premise and you get into what a typical episode would look like. Because obviously you have some setup that you need to do. But if you can get that setup done, the earlier you can get it done, the better. You know, you need to spend some time with everybody, meeting them, finding out who they are, letting the first character you meet introduce you to the next character, introduce you to the next character, so that there is some sort of context. We call that the context chain, to get from one character to the next, so you're not confused. It helps kind of lead the audience on a little bit. But by the halfway point, we have launched into what the series is going to be. We get Ned Stark to, Westeros. Or he has to go off and leave, whatever the thing is that is getting us into series that's launching us. That's our inciting incident needs to be no later than halfway through that episode on that kind of big serialized ideas. And for like a comedy or more episodic thing, all of your premise should be in the cold open. It should be the very beginning, and we should be launched into or by the end of Act 1, you should be launched into a typical episode after that point. And in a short, you still have to do those things. So in a short, you might spend the whole first episode on premise, but you still need to, like, if you look at the Stoner Cat short, by the very end, go, oh, there's a bigger mystery that we're going to uncover. But I mean, that amount of time, the fact that we spent 6 minutes introducing those characters and introducing this sort of new thing that's happened to them, which is now they're sentient. That's the amount of time that you would in a typical episode spend on all of that premise before you move in. So it paces out sort of the same way. Okay, and then when you're pitching your pilot, as you walk us through what the plot of the pilot is, however long that ends up being, important moments. You don't need to tell us every beat. We can fill in gaps. We're smart about plot. You just the important big hanging moments of the pilot. And then after your pilot section, you want to talk about the series as a whole. So in a straight episodic, it would be really, you might talk about a little bit about character arcs of like Ross and Rachel are, or will they, won't they, or whatever that thing is. But really it becomes the, what are your episode ideas? So this is the episode where the gang goes to buy soup and there's a soup Nazi. Like those are the kinds of episode ideas that you want to talk about in a straight episodic piece. And if it's a procedural piece, we'll have, you could talk about, we'll have ripped from the headline episodes like the Casey Anthony case, at least something that we'll do where it's things like that, where you talk about those episodes. On character-driven shows, we want to talk about character arcs and relationship arcs. So when we meet Sarah and Chris, they can't stand each other, but obviously we know they're made for each other. I'm going to get a lot of shit for that because that's just, I don't know where it came from. They were names in front of me. But so we'll watch them as their push and pull over the course of the season until they end up together and we're also happy, whatever those kinds of big arcs. And you'll want to arc out kind of each big character story that you have in that kind of show. And then in like a big idea show, what you're really talking about is plot and story. Obviously as related to character, always coming back to character, but you need to spend some time on like the places that we're going. And in a pitch, you only want to talk about the first season, but you want to know the next seasons. And remember that you want to have, as you're talking, as particularly in a bigger idea kind of serialized show, as you're talking about those big plot arcs, you might say like halfway through the season, Bob will die. And you'll talk about, and you'll see that like that'll be the end of that. You'll have set up Bob in such a way that it'll be so surprising that it'll feel like this big moment cliffhanger thing, so that you can find those touchstones throughout the season. And so when you're pitching those big, huge arcs, or the ship will crash or whatever the thing is, that it feel really surprising. And those are the moments that we remember, is those big poster moments, Bob dying, the ship crashing, whatever those big moments are. I mean, think about it in all the TV shows that you watch. And those kinds of moments that you're planning out for your season, that's what needs to be in the pitch. The machinations and how we get there, it's less important than getting to the moment and seeing the moment. We can figure out the rest of the machinations. And then you need to talk about future seasons if you're asked about it. So then in a wrap up, you just kind of wrap up. So that's the show, that's what we're looking at, and then reiterate theme, reiterate the why of the show, the what's underneath the show, the medicine that we're giving people within their entertainment. So you want to wrap that up that way. But now I'm going to give you some kind of examples and walk you through. So here's the thing. A lot of people use visuals. On a straight up comedy, simple, you don't need it. On a show with a lot of characters, you do. And on a show with animation, obviously you need visual references. And if you don't have the ability to actually make your own animation like our team did, you can pull other visual references to add in if you would like from other shows. It's like, this is the style, this is the kind of thing to give that reference, and you don't need to have access to every animator in the world. And then if there are a lot of characters, you're gonna need a one sheet to make sure that people don't get lost in those characters. And then if you're building a big world, you need to show what those visuals are, and you can pull references. You don't need to like create it, you can pull them together. And we'll walk through a few of these. So what I'm going to show you next is the Stoner Cats Leave Behind. We have pulled out the section that talks about plot because we don't want to spoil everything for you guys. But this is the second version that we saw. The first version was similar, but Ash just continued to add more art, which was so cool. And then here's some real basics. Now, this isn't what they like sat down and opened up and pitched to us. This is more of like a leave behind or preview document. And later we'll get to the kind of document that you would actually use in the middle of the pitch if you wanted to. So this gives this kind of the main idea of here's what the show's about. And it gives us all the important information. It's an adult animated series. That's important to know. And then the basics of what the new information, the new thing that happens, which is these cats become sentient. And this is the kind of fun that we're going to explore. Hijinks ensue. That's where we go. And then, of course, because we have incredible artists, we have wonderful stuff. So back to these great characters. With the strength and weakness thing, that was really helpful for us. People don't do it very often, but we love it. We always ask that, like, what's the Achilles heel question of these cats? Weakness is that Lord Catsington is dead. That is quite a weakness. And then, yes, Mrs. Stoner, I forget that she changed a bit. And then we have these FAQs, and you guys have already seen these FAQs because I think we used some of these on the website. But these are really helpful. This kind of FAQ thing is great. And the fact that they made this pithy and fun and feel like the tone of the show, that's super helpful. And you'll see as we get into other kind of examples that that's the kind of thing that you want to continue on with. And then Brendan, who you'll see, you can see him up here, he keeps us all running on time. He redacted this for our safety. Here's another example of something that we used. This was a big murdery mystery sort of thing, and there were so many characters and so many, because it's Rashomon style, so many different plot pieces to point to other things, that we just put the basics on here so that as we're talking about the plot, as we're talking about the mechanics that are going through each episode, if you forgot who Owen was, you can go back and very quickly look at it. So you can keep something like this up on a thing that's about a lot of characters. That can be really helpful. And then here's an example of something when it comes to like, we're building a world and a feel. So yes, this show was like set in our world, but there is like an edge of uncomfortableness that we should feel. It's like, it's got some genre elements to it. And so that's an example of that. So I'm going to actually share a different document and walk you through how, and then we'll be done. It won't be that we're getting to the end here. Then we can talk about other things that we want to talk about. But let me share a different document and talk about a really, and somebody's calling me, a really easy way you can use a document while you're pitching, which particularly if you get nervous, it's a great way to keep you on track. So let me just stop the share real quick, and then I will share a different document. Can you guys can see that? Yep. Great. So this was actually my pitch deck for my husband. He let me use it on a show that he sold and shot at the CW a couple of years ago. So he is he's a writer, but he doesn't love pitching, but it is a part of the job, unfortunately. So what he did is use this as his sort of walkthrough as he was talking about the show. So, these are sort of the main overarching ideas of what the show is, lots of great visuals. And then he had this as he was talking about the first character with just enough language that we can grasp onto who that character is. A nice visual that obviously, these are all pulled items. These are not, things that he created, it's things that he pulled together. And this is a really common way of doing this. So, he could talk about Victoria, and then he could talk about the town and what that informs with her. And then talk about the other locations and what that informs for them. So this is building the world, because this was obviously a big world building idea. Obviously a world that we're all sort of familiar with. These are the locations, these are the places that we're going to play. And then into the next characters that he could talk about, into the ongoing relationships as he's talking about these people. So this, and I'll just kind of scroll through it, is a really easy way, as you can just kind of know what the kind of beats that you need to hit during each section. And he was doing this, he had designed it in a way that he was telling the plot of the pilot while he was introducing all the characters. So this was a way for him to easily jump out of the plot, then jump back into the plot as he goes between these people. So this is, all fun stuff. Let me see if there's something else. Yeah, so this is basically how he plotted out the entire episode, and so this is, as you can see, final confrontation. So this is the end of the pilot, and then the people that we meet at the very end. So it's literally, he introduced it as he was telling the pilot. So he's introducing each character along the way. So guys, that's kind of the big one. I know I talked fast, but there's a lot to go over, and it's not super easy. I think you guys can Google and look. There's the Reddit screenwriting Reddit is actually great for materials. There's a lot that they have links to. Javi's website that I linked to earlier, he's got a ton of stuff. If you're looking at like bigger, he was one of the original writers on Lost. And if you're looking at bigger drama stuff, that's a great thing to look at. I would love to be able to share a couple of my comedy pitches, but I can't because we're still in with them, unfortunately. But there's some super, super good ones. All right, so questions, thoughts, How do I find those things? Q&A.
Do you want me to bring up some folks?
Sure, anybody, yes, please.
Please do raise your hand and we'll put you in the panel. Thanks.
And while you're raising your hand, Curtis, what do you mean? Yes, we sold that show to numerous networks, 2 domestic, 1 in the UK. And now we're developing it as a movie. So yeah, it's great. You know, just a really quick overview. You know that Hollywood buys, and this is part of the reason that we just are so happy to be doing this here. The movie that we just made that we're just last day of shooting is today actually, has been in production, has been in development for 6 years. It's taken 6 years to make a movie. That's really common. And Hollywood buys a lot of stuff and doesn't necessarily make all of it. Hi, Curtis. Ask me things.
I'm unmuting myself. Sorry if the noise is overwhelming, but can you hear me? Am I coming through okay?
Yep, you're coming through great.
Okay, how do you ultimately choose who to sell to? And is that a joint decision between you and the creators, or the creators kind of like, is that the relief point of great, we got them to buy in and now they're going to take care of deciding, is it reverse financed with NFTs, or is it Netflix? Is it this, or is it that? Yeah. Like how does that decision happen?
Well, I mean, we absolutely make that decision with our creators. So, you know, it's a sort of traditional show. We have our traditional outlets. You go out wide. So how the process would normally work is somebody would bring us something. We would probably give notes. We would do a lot of work on it to make sure that it was really ready. And once it's ready, we would do a process called clearance, where we, as the production company, call all of the networks or studios, depending on whether it's networks or studios, and clear it. And then we'd go in and we'd pitch it around town. And before Zoom, that meant hours and hours in the car. And now that there's Zoom, it means hours sitting at your desk. So that's sort of the traditional route. We feel like there are some things that feel really doable in the NFT space, and it's not everything. Budget is an issue, and it is very expensive to make both animated and traditional content. So, but we do think that there are some things that really, really make sense for us to come this way. And some of that is the personality and ability to listen from the creator. So obviously our 3 people, they're transparent, they want to talk to people, they want to be out there. And we think that that's a really important thing if we're going to do things on the NFT side. And also just a basic like playfulness and experimentation. If it's, you know, somebody who's sort of like stuck in their ways, then they need to stay on the other side. So it's a couple of considerations of what come here. And guys, as we're getting new projects, I mean, I'm getting pitched new projects every day. Obviously, some people are coming in and saying, hey, we have this great NFT thing. We're going to start rolling some of those things your way to look at and decide whether you think it works or not. You guys are the ultimate experts on that. I know we need to get Turhan.
Hey,
right?
Can you hear me? Hey,
yep,
what's up?
I can hear you.
Hey, this is my face and this is my house. How are you guys?
Good, how are you?
I'm great. I'm always great, even when I'm bad. That sounds way too positive, but anyway. How are you guys doing? How are you guys doing?
Great.
All right, my film partner, actually, he's joined too. And I was chatting on the Discord yesterday. You know, I've been in this business for a long time. It's great to hear you talk about this. Big time NFT enthusiast. I got really early in. I'm definitely an early in ape owner. Not bragging, just it's the truth. I'm very thankful to be in this space. And you know, I'm an actor and a screenwriter out here in Hollywood, and I'm on a lot of shows and stuff like that. If you watch Barry, I'm on that, and we're shooting season 3 right now. But I'm always interested in writing, because for writing, it's like you're building a business and you're putting a lot of people to work. And obviously you can do it. You can write on your toilet if you want to. Not that I do that, but I'm saying it's just the galvanization of putting and developing characters, and not just trying to write funny dialogue, and writing from a fanfare point of view is something that I'm seeing in this space right now And obviously, you know, Mila and Ashton and the you know, they're very credible, and this seems like a real deal kind of thing. So I'm more curious about, I have a lot of shows and want to work with anybody, and to be able to develop and stuff like that. But I guess my main question is, hey, everybody that's saying hi to you guys. Really nice chat group here, especially on the Discord. And is that, do they have to be animated, and or
No.
because I saw some of your pitch decks there. We're working on a movie next spring with a high school comedy probably shooting in Canada. And we're working on finalizing a very nice pitch deck, even though we have, you know, half the funding and stuff like that. But it's always important because you can always match fund with that, you know. So I guess my question is, you already answered it. And when do they have to be ready? And I'm sorry, I'm very new to this chat, to the Discord that, you know, happened recently. I was just on it yesterday and communicating with everybody. And so when does that have to be ready? Because I have a lot of pitches that are ready to go. You know, I have a, you know, manager, and, you know, I've got a couple options out there, you know, in the market. But always,
Bardo, do we know what, because I think the intention, and I'm just, correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be, is that everybody will sort of, there'll be an amount of time for people to talk about, like, to put in what they want to pitch. And then they'll be sharing with the community, and then the community will decide the top ones that will come in to pitch to me. So, but I don't know what the timeline is on that. Bardo, do you know?
So that's going to be 2 weeks. That's in the pitch deck, and anybody who owns a Stoner Cat NFT will have a chance to pitch to our wonderful Lisa.
Awesome. And I guess one last question. So if I have, say, a handful of shows ready to go, ready to be looked at, what I think are polished pitch decks, what are passable to, like, say, my manager that says this is the one, because, you know, I can write 7 shows and he'll be very honest. I don't like these 6. I don't feel it. Whether they're good or not has nothing to do with, it's just what I feel, you know. So if I have something ready to go and I shared that, you know, barring the fact that I own a cat, or, you know, Stoner Cat, it's readily to be shareable, or should I be working on something new or something?
So what I can do, Trahan, I can, we'll be sending out an application form, and it can fill it out, and then we will review that in the process. So after this call, I would love to keep in touch with you on the Discord channel.
Yeah, sure. And your name is, you say your name is Anna?
No, I'm Bardo.
Oh, you're Bordeaux. Oh, hey, what's up? You were talking with me yesterday, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. You never know who's what's he on this thing, but anyway.
And it does not need to be new. I mean, it you know, additional attachments make some things challenging, but it does not need to be like a new project that you do just for this. So. Okay,
cool. Thank you.
Open up the treasure trove. You got it.
Yeah. Should I unvideo myself? I don't know how to, is that?
Oh, sure. Don't worry.
Okay.
All right. We've got E Swerve. E. Okay, well, while E comes up, I did see in the chat, DB Rocks asked, how do I put aside my own bias and choose something that others may like, but you don't? I'll tell you that we don't actually put away our bias. For us, it's super important that we make things, I mean, it might not be it has to be something we like, or we won't do it. And we could be wrong. We have been wrong, but we also get a sense of, it has to, let me just clarify. It has to be both something that we like and something that we think that the audience would like. So it has to hit both of those things. There's nothing worse than working on something that you don't love. It's the passion that makes it better. I'm going back to E to see if he's.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't realize you had to unmute yourself on Zoom. So I had a few questions. I'm going to try to shoot them out quick. You can tell me to shut up anytime if I'm taking up too much time. I guess my first one is 2 weeks isn't really a long time. And especially for someone like me who hasn't, you know, this is kind of my first introduction to this kind of thing. I feel like, you know, I have a lot of ideas, kind of like the last guy. And I'm going to suddenly start putting movement into making progress on a pitch deck or whatever we're looking at here. And are you going to do this again? I guess is my question, for those of us who need more time.
Let me see. Let me consider that, and maybe we do need to give it a little more than 2 weeks. If the majority of the community is needs a little more time, then I'm not on any time limit. So that's a really wonderful thing. I'll write that question down.
Okay, cool. Just a thought.
Yep.
And a second question I had, are you familiar with Afro Samurai? Make it a little easier conversation if you are.
I'm not.
Okay, so mini-series. Afro Samurai was a 4-part, if I recall correctly, a 4 or 5-part animated mini-series. And one of my ideas that I've has been my baby for a long time now, I always pictured as a mini-series. And I was wondering if there are any specific nuances to a style like that would change some of the stuff you've talked about. As far as like a pilot episode.
Well, I mean, yeah, anything that's a mini series basically follows the same rule as a serialized show, typically, because it just has an end. So any of those same rules essentially apply. Or like pitching a long movie where you're spending most of the time just pitching the entire arc of the season. But as you're pitching that entire arc of the season, you have to be real concise, and then you need to tell us that's where the pilot ends. The pilot ends with this happening. Then we launch into the rest of the season this way, this way, this way. And I will absolutely look up Afro Samurai. Also, just know that you can't make anything that you don't have the rights to, the underlying rights to. I'm sure.
Oh no, of course. It was just a way to see if you were familiar with the type of story arc.
No, unfortunately, I'm not. I'm going to look it up.
It's okay. It's not bad. It's a cool little animated thing. Samuel L. Jackson, cool. I believe.
Awesome.
You know what? I guess that's it. I guess my other questions kind of did be answered by the previous speaker. So thank you for your time.
And you got it. Thank you. I know we have Chica and Emma. I just can't tell who was first. So somebody jump on.
I'll go. So I'm Chica, and thanks for your time, by the way, Lisa. I think this is awesome. I've learned a lot, took my notes. And like a few other people, I'm an ape. I love the NFT space. I've got two succinct questions. And the first one is, at what point does music enter the pitch or the creation of a show, like soundtrack or theme song, etc.?
Almost never.
Okay.
Unless it's really, really germane to the idea.
Okay.
Because music rights are really challenging. So you can have an idea of like what it's funny on most shows, unless it's like a musical or something that has like really deep music as part of it, it never enters the pitch. And when it does, it's sort of like, we don't know if we can get that song. Yeah, so yeah. Music rights become a really big deal. And so it very rarely is part of the pitch.
Thank you. And when does or how does music get pitched? Is that something the team looks into, or does a musician or a songwriter show up at the door? How does that work?
For when we're in production?
Yeah, in production after the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, typically it's something that we do as we're crewing up, so it comes in a little bit later, depending on. It sort of depends on the project.
Sure.
But it's it's people who get. Unfortunately, that's one of those things that, at least from what I see, it's musicians getting pitched or composers getting pitched from from agents. So that's the majority of it. Is we'll put out that we have a job opening and somebody will have a bunch of ideas, or somebody will have worked with somebody before and want to bring them in to work again.
Gotcha.
And that's if there's original music. Sometimes there's not. But in terms of, like, I'm assuming that you're a musician,
a writer,
or a composer, a writer.
Composer,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other way through is that you consider really music-based shows and kind of come up with a theme and team up with a writer. And if it's a really musical show where it's about the music, whether it's actually a musical or just something that has so much music in the world, or if it's animated where it's just fully soundtrack and no dialogue or whatever that is, maybe you want to consider teaming up with a writer and finding an idea that you can incorporate your music into.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, got it. And then Emma.
Hi.
Hi.
This has been so interesting. I am an actress, and I'm also working on a pilot that I'm writing to become a series. And I was curious, when you are looking at pitches, how much material do you want to see? Like, should I come in with a full-blown pilot script, a season's worth of things?
It absolutely varies. You should, if you're just getting into the writing side, you should have written a pilot. If we can't, on the traditional Hollywood side, this is, for an NFT side, there's a little more flexibility and we can pair people up. The traditional Hollywood side, I need to have read your writing before you can even come in and pitch to me. So I need to see a spec or a sample. There's this idea out in the world that you need to write a spec like of a different show that exists. Don't. Write your own thing. Because I need to see your voice and your writing, especially if you're talking about being a creator, as opposed to staffing or something. And whether or not you're going to send me that a spec of the thing that you want to pitch, or if you want to send a different spec so that I can see the quality of your writing and then say this is the other thing I need to pitch, that's better. We will never ever read more than one episode ever, even nobody will. We're just incredibly busy. But we do need to read to make sure that you can write. So we need something of yours to read. We need you to have some sort of pitch ideas, pages, whatever it is. And whether you just tell us about those or you actually share those pages are kind of up to you. The Writers Guild has opinions on that. But if you're not in the Writers Guild, there's lots of ways around it. But you don't need to feel obligated to share pages if you're not comfortable with it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, like I've got a whole pilot script written. I just was curious if that's something that you'd want to see in a pitch, or if that's like you do the pitch and then after you maybe want to see that.
Oh yeah, we do. Okay, that's a good, yes. Like, do you do pitch first or script first, which is a thing that we deal with constantly. The answer is script first, pitch later, because otherwise you spend the entire pitch not trying to spoil the read. So let the people read the script. If they respond, then meet and have a pitch and talk about the season. Awesome. And series.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Curtis, another question. For pitches, do I pitch with the creators? I don't pitch with the creators. The creators pitch. I just happen to be there. I show up to the support, but they're the ones doing all of the heavy lifting. So we never pitch without our writers there. We do something called a pre-pitch all the time, where we call in advance and say, hey, we have this project, do you want to hear it? And we have to talk about it at that point, but so that's the answer there. Anonymous attendee, what's the most cliched ideas? Let me tell you the big one, but particularly from emerging writers, which is, it's about me and my wacky friends. Your friends aren't as wacky as you think they are. Yeah. So just know it's tough. That's one of the big ones. And then a lot of like recently, and then there's a lot of like fantasy related. If it's like, this came out of my D&D group. Yeah, no, we've heard that one for sure. And it's magical realism. Yes, we've all seen the magical realism quite a bit. It's about these two buddy cops. Trust, we've heard. So that's it has to be a unique take on those things. And we actually, we as Orchard Farm are really unique in that we like weird shit and like things that we haven't seen before. Chica, that question on can you see and download, that's going to be up to our creators. I don't share things without their permission, so I will ask them and I will tell you guys when we can. Trevor, that's an interesting point. Let me bring that back to the team. Trevor asked about, since there's so many actors here, do we want to do something where they can get a chance to voice something? I will, let me put that, I will put that and take it back. No guarantees, Obvi. That's right, Trevor. Whatever, no guarantees. Anybody else? Questions? We've got 3 minutes left, guys. You want to talk about, wait. Oh, Vitamin D, I had a question about weeding out the bad apples in Hollywood and finding agents and stuff to be sure that you have the right people. It's hard to get an agent. the answer to how to get an agent is that you write and you write again and you write more and you share it with everybody. You send it to everyone. And then somebody will send it to somebody else who will send it to somebody else. There are 4 contests that make it worth it, which are, you know, Blacklist, Humanitas, Austin. There's one called Cinestory that I've done that actually is kind of great because you get really direct like feedback and notes from real professionals, not from like paid readers. So, and sometimes I have seen people like get signed from those. And then how do you weed out the good and the bad is you ask a lot of questions and you advocate for yourself. You are, as oh my gosh, why did his name just leave my brain? Said earlier, Turhan said earlier, you are building a business and you are that business. Your talent is that business. So you have to ask all the business questions that you would if anybody wanted to buy anything from you that you created. So it's asking, what are you going to do with this? Like in terms of agents, it's like, how are you going to sell me? And if an agent gives you like a half-assed sort of answer, they're not the right person for you. If they're tough on you and say, you need to do this and this and this, I need to see these pages by this day, I need all that, that's the person you want. Somebody who's going to be really, really actively engaged in your work. Ash has a wonderful, wonderful manager who sent their stuff to us. So you do want somebody who has at least enough working clients who are not so far above your level that it doesn't work for you. And then you trust your spidey senses, ask questions, respectfully ask questions. And if you don't understand, respectfully ask them again, read every contract, read every page. And yeah, so that's that. Is there a place to read the original pitches of shows? Sometimes you can just Google them. What you should read, absolutely read, oh my God, if Mac did a voice, okay. Absolutely read the pilot for Community. The cold open of the Community is, that first off, the pilot is perfect. Perfect, it's really good. It's perfectly structured. And the cold open introduces the characters with such expediency. That is a class in how to pack in a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. I have to go on a call now. That's for another thing. Yes, Tron, yes, start a writers group. You're exactly right. Start a writers group and make your own shit. Make your own shit, put it out there, write shit, create shit, direct stuff. Don't spend money on it. You can use your iPhone. If you're going to spend any dollars, then you're all gonna laugh at me. Spend it on sound. Okay, guys. I'm gonna have to run. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.